Iran was once a beacon of progress in the Middle East, a land of art, music, and freedoms few could imagine. Then, in 1979, everything changed. The Islamic regime took control, imposing strict laws that reshaped daily life and ended freedoms almost overnight. Many who had once cheered for the monarchy would soon regret it. This was the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Iran was once one of the most modern and progressive countries in the region. Its cities were vibrant and its universities active. Its art scene bold. Western music played on the radio. Women worked as lawyers, doctors, professors. They dressed how they chose. Political debate existed, though tightly controlled. The country was ambitious, industrializing, expanding its oil wealth, projecting confidence. Everything changed when the Islamic regime took power and imposed extreme religious laws, reshaping daily life and freedom almost overnight. Within 365 days of protest, women went from wearing miniskirts in Tehran to being forced into hijab by state mandate. Public concerts were banned and nightclubs were shut down. Western cultural influence was systematically dismantled. The monarchy was overthrown. A new system emerged, one that fused religion with state control in a way Iran had never experienced before. The irony of the 1979 revolution is stark. One autocrat was removed. Another system of concentrated power replaced it. To understand how that happened, you have to look beyond 1979. Resentment in Iran did not begin with one protest or one cleric. It had been building for decades. For more than a century, Iran had lived under the shadow of foreign interference. Britain, Russia, and later the United States had competed for influence over Iranian territory, oil, and politics. Many Iranians saw their country as manipulated from outside, its sovereignty compromised again and again. In 1953, a CIA-assisted coup helped remove Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he nationalized Iran's oil industry. The coup strengthened the monarchy and deepened suspicion toward Western governments. In the 1960s, the Shah launched the White Revolution, a sweeping modernization campaign. Land reforms prompting infrastructure projects, expanded education, voting rights for women, and industrial expansion. On paper, it looked transformative, but economically, Iran grew rapidly. Oil money poured in as cities expanded at breakneck speed. But the benefits were uneven. Wealth concentrated in urban elites. Rural populations migrated to cities faster than jobs could absorb them. As a result, inflation rose. Traditional power structures, especially the clergy and landowners, lost influence. Rapid westernization unsettled conservatives. For some, modernization felt like cultural erasure. At the same time, political repression intensified. Opposition parties were marginalized or banned. Critics were monitored by SAVAK, the Shah's secret police, which meant that arrests, censorship, and intimidation were common. Public dissent carried consequences. The Shah presented Iran as modern, powerful, forward-looking. But beneath that surface, anger was spreading. Among religious conservatives, leftists, nationalists, intellectuals, students, workers. And one cleric in exile was becoming a symbol of that anger. Ruhollah Khomeini had been forced into exile in 1964 after criticizing the Shah and condemning what he saw as subservience to the United States. From Iraq and later from France, he continued to speak. His sermons were recorded, copied and smuggled into Iran on cassette tapes. His message was simple and direct. The monarchy was corrupt. Western influence was corrupting Iranian identity. True justice required Islamic governance. By the late 1970s, Iran's economy was under strain. Oil price instability shook revenues as inflation eroded buying power. Massive state spending projects became harder to sustain. Urban frustration deepened. The gap between promise and reality widened. In January 1978, a newspaper published an article attacking Khomeini. Religious students in the city of Qom protested. Security forces responded with violence. Several protesters were killed. In Shi'i tradition, mourning occurs 40 days after a death. On the 40th day, new demonstrations were held to honor those killed. More violence followed, more deaths. Another 40-day mourning cycle. Protest became ritual. Ritual became escalation. The movement broadened. It was no longer only religious students. It was leftists, secular nationalists, workers, oil laborers, middle-class professionals. Strikes spread through the oil industry, the backbone of Iran's economy. A general strike paralyzed the country. On August 19, 1978, a cinema in Abadan was set on fire. More than 400 people lost their lives. The perpetrators remained disputed, but the tragedy intensified public outrage. Many blamed the regime. Trust collapsed further. On September 8th, later known as Black Friday, troops opened fire on demonstrators in Tehran. Dozens were eliminated. Some estimates say more. When images started circulating, the Shah's government insisted it was maintaining order. Protesters called it proof of tyranny. By late 1978, millions of people were marching. From exile in France, Khomeini rejected compromise. When the Shah offered concessions and promised reform, Khomeini dismissed them. The monarchy, he insisted, had to go. In January 1979, the Shah left Iran, officially for medical treatment. Many understood it as exile, but he would never return. On February 1st, 1979, millions lined the streets of Tehran as Khomeini returned after 15 years away. He stepped off the plane not as a marginal cleric, but as the symbolic leader of a national uprising. 10 days later, the armed forces declared neutrality. On February 11th, the monarchy effectively collapsed. Revolutionary allies declared Iran would become an Islamic Republic, with Khomeini at its center. At that moment, many factions believed they had won. Secular leftists thought a pluralistic government might emerge. Nationalists expected democratic reform. Students envisioned political freedom. Women who protested against repression believed they were securing broader rights. Few anticipated the speed with which power would consolidate. The revolutionaries who prayed in university courtyards and marched in the streets were diverse. But Khomeini and his closest allies had a clear blueprint: velayat-e-faqih, governance by the Islamic jurist. Not symbolic religious guidance, direct political authority. Within months, former allies were sidelined and some were driven into exile while others were arrested. Newspapers critical of clerical rule were closed. Political parties dissolved or suppressed. In April 1979, a national referendum approved the creation of an Islamic Republic. The question was presented in binary terms: yes or no. There was no alternative framework offered, so the majority voted yes. A new constitution followed. It established the position of supreme leader, granting sweeping authority over the military, judiciary, state broadcasting, and key political institutions. Elections would continue, but candidates would be vetted by the Guardian Council, a body aligned with clerical authority. Iran would retain republican structures, but ultimate power rested with religious leadership. This dual system created a paradox that continues today. Iran holds elections. Presidents are chosen by popular vote. Parliament exists. Political debate occurs. The press, compared to many regional neighbors, has at times been relatively vibrant, yet all operates within boundaries defined by clerical oversight. The revolution displaced monarchy, but it did not dismantle centralized control. It redefined it. Social transformation was immediate. The Family Protection Act, which had expanded women's rights in marriage and divorce, was voided. New dress codes were enforced, and the hijab became mandatory. Mixed-gender social spaces became narrowed. Public concerts were banned. Nightclubs closed. Western music disappeared from state airwaves. Cultural institutions were purged or restructured. Within a year, daily life looked radically different. The fusion of religion and state power extended into education, law, and media. Revolutionary committees patrolled neighborhoods. The newly formed Revolutionary Guards consolidated security authority alongside the regular army. Then came the hostage crisis. In November 1979, student protesters seized the United States Embassy in Tehran. 66 American diplomats and citizens were taken hostage. What was initially framed as a short-term protest demanding the Shah's extradition became a 444-day standoff. The crisis reshaped Iran's global image. It also strengthened hardliners domestically. Anti-Western rhetoric became central to revolutionary identity. Internationally, the revolution sent shockwaves. The United States had backed the Shah for decades. The United Kingdom had long historical involvement in Iran's political and oil affairs. France hosted Khomeini during his final months in exile. The Carter administration struggled to manage the collapse of a key regional ally. The broader Cold War context amplified every move. There is debate over the extent to which Western governments backed the revolution. What is clear is that none effectively prevented the Shah's fall. Miscalculations, diplomatic pressure on human rights, and underestimation of clerical mobilization all played roles in shaping the environment in which the revolution succeeded. Inside Iran, support for regime change did not automatically equal support for a theocratic state. Many protesters believed they were fighting corruption, inequality, repression. Few imagined how tightly religion and governance would merge. That miscalculation defines the revolution's legacy. For some, 1979 restored cultural authenticity and independence from foreign domination. For others, it replaced one form of authoritarianism with another, one anchored not in monarchy, but in religious absolutism. The revolution cannot be reduced to a single narrative. It was not solely Islamist. It was not solely anti-Western. It was a coalition uprising born of economic frustration, political repression, cultural anxiety, and historical grievance. Yet the outcome was clear. Iran became an Islamic Republic. Over the decades that followed, the system endured. It adapted. It survived war with Iraq in the 1980s. It weathered sanctions. It faced internal protests. In 1999, 2009, 2019, and 2022. Each wave revealed tension between the state's ideological framework and segments of society pushing for reform or transformation. The revolution remains commemorated annually on February 11th. Official narratives celebrate independence, resistance, sovereignty. Critics point to curtailed freedoms, strict social codes, and constrained political choice. The question that lingers is not only how the revolution happened, but whether its architects fully understood what they were building. Iran in 1975 could host Frank Sinatra. By 1980, public concerts were banned. Pro-Shah demonstrators in early 1979 believed they were defending national stability. Within weeks, that system was gone. Women who marched against repression found themselves subject to new legal mandates governing dress and behavior. Students who occupied streets in the name of justice became part of a movement that concentrated authority in clerical hands. History rarely unfolds in straight lines. Revolutions rarely deliver exactly what coalitions imagine. The 1979 Islamic Revolution reshaped not only Iran, but the geopolitics of the Middle East. It redefined relations with the United States. It altered regional power balances. It introduced a model of governance that fused electoral mechanisms with religious oversight, and it remains unfinished in the minds of many Iranians. Some see it as liberation from monarchy and foreign domination. Others see it as a moment when opportunity narrowed instead of expanded. One system ended, another began. Next week, we go deeper into the man at the center of the storm, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. His rule, his decisions, his miscalculations, and the forces that made his fall possible. But in 1979, the streets decided, and Iran has never been the same.